Coming to you from the Deep South, this is the Blue Collar Leadership Podcast. High impact leadership is not reserved for leaders, and it has nothing to do with your position, title, or rank. However, it does have everything to do with your character. It's time to climb to the next level and beyond, personally and professionally. Now, let's start making it happen with your host, Mac Story.
All right. Thanks for listening to the Blue Collar Leadership Podcast today. So today we finally made it up to part 3 of 3 in this 3-part interview series with Joshua Davis. And we're going to pick right up where we left off in episode 2. So if you haven't listened to part 1 and part 2 of Joshua's interview, make sure you go back and listen to those before you listen to this one. You don't have to, but it'll make a lot more sense since this is part 3 of 3. You need part 1 and 2 for this one to really impact you. But in today's episode, Joshua is going to talk about the impact, what he's been learning, how it's impacted his job and affected his relationship with his leaders and with his coworkers. He's also going to share about. He's going to tell you what his favorite book is so far. I think he's read 6 books, and he's going to tell you about his favorite one, and he's going to tell you what the most impactful principle that he's learned is. So let's jump right back in where we left off last week. So tell me how's it affected all of this 4.5 months of intentional growth that you've been doing for yourself? How's it affected the way you see your job? I know you say you drive a trash truck. You may drive it forever, but that'll only be because you want to. And you may want to, and nothing wrong with it if you want to, but when you start growing like you're growing, time, you give it enough time, you're going to be given opportunities to do other things. And then you don't have to do them, but you're going to have an option of doing them. And they may or may not be even in the same place you work now. But when you grow like this, you get given opportunities. You got to get some track record. You got to get a track record established. And then,
oh yeah,
when people see you ain't slipping back, and you ain't going back, and you still head forward, things are going to happen. But just how do you just in general see your job? Not necessarily what you want to do or don't want to do, but how did it change how you see your job when you started learning this stuff?
Well, wow, that's a good question. So to go back to the way I was before was, I show up, I'm already upset about something. I'm having a bad day, and I don't deal with the other people very well, and they kind of all avoid me because they're aware by now, after 7 years of me being mad all the time, they just kind of leave me alone. But since this has started, it's helped me to see, again, more how, I'm responsible for my behavior and for my attitude, that I can't put that blame on anybody else. That's me. And so now I walk in every day with a completely different mindset. I walk in wanting to see what opportunity will come my way this day. And that could be an interaction with a coworker. That could be driving a piece of equipment that I haven't driven in quite a while, a different route that I haven't driven in a while, things to kind of mix it up and keep it exciting. And the biggest benefit out of these last 4 months has been seeing the positive reaction from my coworkers. They're seeing it. And, these are a bunch of people that, they're very hard, I guess, to persuade back the other way, once you've been horrible to them for so long. And I think I've seen some signs that I think these relationships are turning back around. And one of the things I think has contributed to that out of this material is I've never been able to ask for help. I always had to be in control of everything I did. I couldn't accept help. Well, I've started asking people, hey, what can I do differently? What bad do you see in me that I can work on? Help me understand more about how you have seen me over these last few years. And I have gotten a lot more participation and feedback than I expected. Some of it was hard to hear, but definitely needed. So I appreciate their honesty. And it's been a hard lesson, but it's definitely helped. So opening yourself up to others soliciting that feedback, and kind of like habit 5. We talked about this earlier, is seeking to understand before being understood. And
That's a big one.
I always. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I just said that's a big one. That's a heavy hitting principle right there.
Oh boy, yeah, it's kind of been my magnet, and that's what I've been orbiting around, is because I never took the time to understand anybody else. Talk to my ex-wife; she'll tell you. But yeah, that's the thing, is I never took the time to understand anybody else because it was my way. I knew I was right, and my way was the better way, and I didn't care what anybody else thought. And you can't be a leader, you can't build trust, and you can't influence people if all you're thinking about is yourself. The only one you get to influence is you. And I wasn't even good at that because I was miserable. I couldn't make myself happy. So I think down at heart, I am a social person, even though out there in the real world, I'm not as much. But I enjoy being a part of something. And I never really allowed myself to do that because I was, so caught up with all the bad stuff that I had brought upon myself. And so yeah, it's, man, and all that, we just started this on January 20th. It's crazy.
It is. That's why you on my podcast today.
Man, but yeah, if anything I could tell anybody out there listening, if you're struggling to accept yourself, then just ask for help. I never could. It was so hard to ask for help. I wouldn't do it. I thought that was a sign of weakness. But you know what? In the end, that's what makes you one of the strongest people, is you need help, and you're willing to humble yourself to ask for it. And that was a very tough lesson for me to learn, but I could tell you without a doubt, it's paying off. It's changing things. I mean, it's changed some of my relationships at home, at work. It's incredible. It's changing the way that I feel about myself. And I think that's probably the biggest thing that it just, oh man, it's incredible, because I didn't like me for a long time. And because I didn't like me, I didn't like anybody else. And I'm getting to know me a little better day by day by using these principles, by applying them. And that's the thing, you have to apply them. You can't just read the book and then go to work and be your old self. I've tried using some of these principles on people at work. They don't even know it. And, it's kind of fun in a way, but it's also pretty enlightening too, because, what you talk about on your podcast and you say in your books, man, it's absolutely right. And it is effective. It really is. We got time for me to tell you about the trash story?
Yeah, man, go ahead. That's related to your job, right? That story.
Yeah. So this was prior to getting on the phone with Jimmy Collins when I talked to him, and it was really interesting because this is one of the stories that he talks about in his book and in his stories, and it was very similar. So we have a east side of our building, our property. The wind blows all the little pieces of trash over that way, and it's a little grassy area that's probably about 300 feet long and 20 feet wide, and it's just like a magnet for all the trash. And one day we don't have a lot going on. It's a nice day, so I grab a couple trash cans and some pickers, and I go out there and I start picking up trash.
Is that part of your job to do that?
Oh, no, it was just, find anything to do, because you don't want to get caught standing around, right?
Okay.
And it was a beautiful day. So we were done with our routes or whatever it was. I don't remember that day, but wasn't a whole lot going on. So I'm out there picking up trash. Well, here comes one of my supervisors. And he's, "What you doing?" "Oh, I was pretty bored. I didn't feel like washing any carts today, so here I am." "All right." So he walks away, comes back a couple minutes later. He's got his own trash can and his own pickers, and he's picking up trash. We're talking, shooting the breeze, and it wasn't much long after that. Here comes the second supervisor. Man, what y'all doing? Just picking up trash. All right. So he walks away, comes back with some grabbers, and now it's the three of us, and we're out there picking this stuff up. And I think it was only an hour or so, and we had most of it done. And I clock out at 2:00. So me and one of the other supervisors, we leave at 2:00. And the third guy that joined us, him and some of the other people leave at 4:00. So they ended up finishing it, and it was just random happenstance that I guess they saw me out there doing it and felt like joining in. So, just leading through example and modeling something, it can be pretty effective. So that was a really cool moment.
Yeah. So we say leadership's influence, right? So
Right.
You getting out there taking responsibility, that was all you did. And that action influenced them to come out and join you. But then what happened to their influence when they come out and joined you and helped you? Because they didn't have to, they're the boss, but they come out and help you. So how did this, that, forget everything else that you know about them, for the listener, just break it down to that one point. Because all they really did was come help you do something they didn't have to do. That's like the principle underneath it, right? And so what did that do for their influence with you?
Oh, it boosted it for sure. It made me feel really good that, they cared enough to help. And I didn't ask them to. They just did it. And it was really cool. Really good moment.
And I don't know, but I bet if I could talk to them, your influence probably increased with them, because they didn't ask you to go out and do that either, did they?
No, they didn't. I was just roaming around looking for something to do. So it all worked out.
Well, that's good stuff. So we're about to wrap it up. I'm going to ask you, and you may have already talked about it. If so, you can just kind of cover it briefly again. But if not, you can get into it however deep you want. But actually, I'm going to ask you 2 questions. So the first, I'll ask you both of them now, but then we'll go back to the first one. So first one is out of the 6 books you read, what do you have a favorite? And it doesn't matter if it ain't mine. I don't care about that. But what's your favorite book? And then also, what's your favorite principle that you've learned, one like you really that resonates with you or you like to apply? So what's your favorite book so far? Content, not you ain't got to tell me all about the book, but which book, if you're going to tell somebody who's listening, out of all the books that you've read, somebody's listening, they say, well, I don't like to read either, but Josh was talking about reading and I'm gonna go give it a shot. Which one you think would be the most beneficial based on your journey?
For me personally, the one that stood out to me is your 10 foundational elements of intentional transformation. Because for me, that's where I'm at in my life. That's what I'm wanting to accomplish. So beginning with the end in mind, my end in mind currently is to transform myself to be better than what I once was. So that book resonated with me pretty good. Definitely recommend that one.
Okay, and I'll just tell the listeners, since you said that if they're a podcast listener, which if they listen to this, they can go back to episode 158. They obviously can get a lot more out of the book, but there's 11-part series on that book that starts at episode 158 where I talk about it. So what were you going to say, Joshua?
Well, I was just going to add that there is one line in there that I highlighted that I think is really important, especially for me. I'll read it real quick.
Okay.
So it's not too far into it. I think it's chapter 7, vision is the foundation of hope, where you say, whatever you do, don't make the common mistake of asking your friends and relatives to validate your vision. Unless they have done what you want to do or are doing what you want to do, they're not likely to provide meaningful support. Instead, they will usually question your ability, provide plenty of reasons it can't or won't happen, and place doubt in your mind. I'm very susceptible to the people around me and their opinions. So that's a big hit for me to stay on track and stay on course, is just find your vision and work towards it, without allowing other people to put that doubt in your mind. That's a big key for me.
That's awesome, man. And thank you for sharing about that book. And real quick, I know you listened to those 11-part series on the audio, and then you read the book. Can you remember how much difference there was between? You seem like you get more out of reading the book. I know you get a lot out of the podcast, but what's the difference for you personally? Listen to the podcast and then read the same content. What's different about it for you?
Sure. Well, think of it as reading a book versus watching the movie. Although I guess the other way around. So the podcast for me is kind of bullet points. And then what's weird, I guess, sounding with that analogy, is the book then becomes the movie for me. It becomes a picture. There's a lot more detail in it, and the stories, you go deeper into the stories that help solidify your points. And so, yeah, definitely the book. If you have time to listen to the podcast, I definitely recommend it. And then when you hit the book, it sinks in a lot better. So.
Okay. All right. So I appreciate you sharing about that. And I didn't know which one you might have said. So that's a powerful book.
And it had a pretty good inscription too.
Oh yeah. You want to share that? I don't remember what it said. I don't know if you asking me because you want to share it or you're welcome to if you like.
Yeah, if you don't mind.
Okay. This is
so
you ordered that book through my website, so I signed it and sent it to you. You told me it was for you, right? Or something like that. I can't remember. I can't remember nothing, Joshua, except leadership principles.
No. So you inscribed this on March 31st for me, and it says, Josh, when you intentionally change your thoughts will automatically change your life. I hope you find value in these pages. I believe in you. Keep climbing. Your friend, Max Story. And I'm a pretty sentimental guy, so something like this means the world to me. And it makes me want to do more, to be more, and I don't like to let people down. And that's just the way I've always been. And not that I'm saying I would let you down, but it's just a motivating factor for me. When someone takes the time to do something like that for me, then I want to give so much more back. So, I greatly appreciate you.
Well, you're welcome and you're worth it. That's what I always tell folks. And it's awesome to hear you share that. And I give you a little insight right there, a little lesson around that. Kind of let the cat out of the bag on some of these things. But John Maxwell, I learned it from him. He does it for all the people on his team. He did it for his children. Pretty much everybody that he cares about. He calls it's a leadership principle. Give people a reputation to uphold. And he's got nicknames for all his grandkids, a nickname with meaning. And like, I think his personal assistant, her name's Linda. He always, anytime he ever introduces her anywhere, I'm pretty sure it's her. I may be mistaken, but he's like, no, it's the president of his company, Mark Cole. He always talks about, when he introduces Mark, he always says, Mark represents me well, all the time. And it's kind of like, it's giving him a reputation to uphold. And someone else, I forget it, probably his wife, but he always talked about, she's the wind beneath my wings kind of thing. And, that's a little more personal thing between him and people he's really close to. But what you described about what that meant to you is kind of the same way. I didn't write it necessarily for that, but the way you took it, that's actually what it has become. That inscription in that book has become kind of me giving you a reputation to uphold, because you get to decide what something means to you. And what you described to me is an example of that, actually, even though it wasn't intended necessarily to be that way. You kind of made it that way.
Well,
so once you make it that way, it is that way.
Well, yeah. And, anytime I go out and I'm talking to someone about this material, I have no hesitation in saying where I got it. So, hey, there's this guy, Max Story, and I'm right then representing your brand. And I want to help promote your brand because of how it's affected me. So, I don't want to represent it in a bad way, and not at all. I want to make your brand something that people could look forward to and want to be a part of. So, yeah.
It's
I'm
so
grateful.
it's so awesome, man, how many similarities we have in our story and our journey. Because when I got certified to teach John Maxwell stuff and all that, I was really representing his brand. I hadn't written a book back in those days, and I was, the first time that I ever went there, I went there a bunch of times over several years, but the very first time I went and paid the $5,000 to get certified to teach some of his stuff. And when I left, that's why I told my son, I'm like, he's letting us stand on his shoulders, literally, because, let me put the John Maxwell team stamp or whatever on my business card, the seal. And back in those days, that's what I told, I didn't have blue collar leadership and all that. I was teaching his stuff, standing on his shoulders. And I told my son, Eric, I'm like, I'm done using profanity, because if I'm going to represent his brand, he wouldn't be using profanity like that, because he was a former pastor and all that stuff. I said, so what's one way I can reward him? He won't ever know it. I ain't never got to tell him, but he won't know it, but I know it. It's one of them things they talk about character, that's integrity's what you do when ain't nobody watching. And in a sense, that's kind of what you just described, because I'm not seeing you do that, and I'm not knowing that you're caring, but you care. And that's the same way it was with me, with John. So that's neat to hear you say that story, because I had the same kind of feeling in a different way for different reasons, for John. So that's pretty cool to you say that. So if you've said it already, or if you hadn't, what's your favorite quote or principle out of these 4.5 months? What's like the one that stands out?
Well, humility seems to be the big one for me. Man, I can't really pinpoint any specific one, but
is there a quote? Is there a quote you say a lot, like that you teach to people or something?
Thing.
Oh, okay. About the principles.
Yeah, I use that one a lot. There you go. Put me on the spot again. I think when I'm bringing this up to somebody, more times than not, I'm just, I always bring up the 7 habits. And I think that's kind of the easiest way I have to communicate with anybody about the material, because I find it so relatable to everything that I do. So, there's a gentleman that I talk to at work here and there, and I constantly throw out the, begin with the end in mind, and, things like that, where, it's him and I are in similar situations where we're kind of in the middle of our career and we don't really know where it's going or what we want to be, but it's like, well, we need to figure that out. Why can't we figure that out? Where do you want to go? Where do you want to be, and who do you want to be? And, I have that conversation with that gentleman every so often. So that's a good one. That's kind of my go-to, I guess.
Okay. All right.
Because we get a lot of complaining. I'm around a lot of people where we constantly complain about something. So, like, well, if you're going to complain, then what's your solution?
Yeah.
Let's talk about it. What end game do you have in mind? So, I'd have to say that's my go-to.
Okay, that's good stuff, man. And it's obviously mine. I talk about it all the time. I think about the 7 habits every day. I always tell people, if you really, really, really know the 7 habits, you ain't got to know anything else if you really know them. But most people, they don't really know them. A lot of people read the book and they tell me they read the book, and I say, what's your favorite habit? They don't even know one of the habits. They don't even know one habit, much less how to teach it and all the underlying principles that are found within it. And usually, each habit, the habit is a principle, but to apply the principle, like you were talking about earlier, habit 5, seek first to understand, then be understood. That's the principle of habit 5. But to be able to do that, you got to have worked on a whole lot of stuff within yourself. You got to be secure. You got to be proactive. You got to be not negative. You got to be a lot of things to do that one thing. Does that make sense? You agree with that?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, I do. And that takes a lot of work.
It does. And that's the hardest habit. Dr. Covey says that's the hardest habit. I believe it. It's the one that it's been hardest for me. And he says it's hardest for most everybody he ever talked to. And it was hardest for him. And you talked about it pretty good a while ago. That how powerful it is. It's hard to get it right, but it's
Well,
powerful if you get it right.
Oh yeah, that's the one I hold myself to, and I think that's my biggest weakness over the years. That's what it has been, is that I didn't care what anybody else thought. I just cared about myself. So for me personally, when I'm talking to myself, that absolutely is. I have to understand other people, but when I'm communicating with them, I want to know what they're thinking, and I want to know where they're going in their mind. And so yeah, it's definitely figure out where they're going, what their end game is. So, but I guess that kind of correlates with understanding them also. So,
Okay. You have
yeah,
any?
they all kind of blend together.
Yeah. You got any closing thought? Anything maybe I didn't ask or you hadn't shared yet you'd like to share before we wrap up this episode and call it a wrap?
Oh man. All I can think of to say other than, thank you so much for this opportunity. I can't believe I'm here 4 months after hearing you for the first time. And it's been an incredible, life-changing journey. So I'm blessed. I thank God, and I'm just so happy to be here. And huge thanks to all the other gentlemen and all the other people I've spoken with through this journey that have helped me get here. And all I can recommend to anybody that's listening, that if you're on the edge and you don't know what to do, I would say just take that chance and take a step forward in this direction. And I didn't want to make the effort. I didn't want to take that chance. I like my safety and security, and this was a huge leap for me, but it's paying huge dividends. So get involved and get other people involved, because you're absolutely right, Mac, when you say, you have to apply it and you have to teach it, in order to be it and for it to change your life. So yeah, all of you listening, get out there and do it. It's hard at first, but it gets easier.
Well, awesome. So I appreciate you being on. You've listened to all my episodes. I don't have a lot of guests. I get several requests every week from all kind of people who want me to interview them. They want to be on my podcast. Oh. And I mean, some of them, they've done some cool things. They're probably some cool people, but I'm always nice. I reply back to them and tell them, I appreciate your interest in the Blue Collar Leadership Podcast, but I only feature people. Most of my podcast is me it's for me to share knowledge, and stories and teach. That's what it's really for. I said, but I tell them that you will hear some interviews of other people, but I only interview people who I actually know and who are hungry, and I got to know something about the character, like you talked about, who they are, where they're going, and where they've already come from, where they were. And I wanted to get you on here, and I appreciate you being on, because your story is powerful. There's you think about when you listen to Daniel or any of the podcast interviews you listen to, whoever it was, or how you felt, what you learned from them. You're doing that for somebody else. I don't know who's going to listen to this. I don't know what they're going to get out of it, but somebody's going to listen to it, and somebody's going to get something out of it. It's because you said yes and had the courage to come on here. And all it really was like us having a conversation. I like things to be authentic. But I want to ask you, and don't feel obligated, Joshua, because some people don't want to, and that's okay. But I want to ask you right now, if somebody wanted to reach out to you, how could they do it if they want to?
I would have no problem with that, actually. I'm turning into you kind of in a way. I love talking to people and hearing their stories. So
okay,
you can reach out to me. I can give you my phone number. My cell number is 314-517-0581, or you can reach me on my email, which is the same as my name, Joshua Davis 77@hotmail.com.
Okay, and you're on LinkedIn?
Oh, sorry. Yes, sir. I am on LinkedIn.
So they can connect with you or follow you, or I see you
Absolutely.
writing some positive stuff out there, and your name on LinkedIn is your full name, Joshua Davis?
Yes, sir.
And you're in, what's your city again?
I live in Lake St. Louis.
All right. All right, Mr. Joshua, I really appreciate you being on here. It's been a pleasure to have you and to hear your story. You shared some powerful nuggets. So thank you very much. And I'm going to wrap up the episode. So for all the listeners out there, yes, sir. Thank you. Talk to you next time.
Make it happen or someone else will. It might as well be you. Are you serious about taking your career and your life to the next level and beyond? Check out Mac Story's Blue Collar Leadership series books and others, now available on audio, along with paperback and ebooks at Amazon, iTunes, and Audible. Please visit bluecollarleadership.com to learn about Mac's books, programs, special offers, certifications, and more. Thank you for listening to the Blue Collar Leadership Podcast.